get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
And we are joined by Lou Cairo, who is the founder of the GWC Injury Lawyers. You can find out more about them at justicestartstoday.com. And Lou, I have to thank Harris Elliott in your office sent over some really great background information for me, explaining a lot about the recent Supreme Court decision on LGBTQ employment and also about the ruling on DACA. Now, some of this is stuff that I had not read before. For instance, for the decision affirming that LGBTQ workers should not face workplace discrimination, I didn't realize that the dissent that was filed by Alito and Clarence Thomas accused the rest of the court of legislating, which is, of course, something that they at least give lip service to not trying to do. And I thought that was in direct opposition to what Neil Gorsuch wrote, if I understand him, when he said he was being a textualist. Lou, does being a textualist mean that you are basically just looking at the words and defining them and sticking with the meaning of the text?
In essence, it can mean that, but it's really, it all comes down to what people's interpretation is, right? I mean, one person says, hey, that's what it says. Another person says, yeah, but I think the intent by using those words was something else. And that really seems to be what this decision's about. And for your listeners who may not be familiar with it, it's a Title VII case, which is a federal law that bars discrimination in the workplace for things such as someone's age, someone's race, their color, their sex, male versus female, their religion, things of that nature. And we know you can't say, I'm going to fire you because you're Catholic, because you're Jewish, or you're Hindu. I'm going to fire you because you're over 40 years old, or because you're Italian, or you're black, or a female. The issue in this case is the first time that the Supreme Court actually considered the question of, can you fire somebody? Does Title VII protect you for your sexual orientation? You know, not your age, not your race, not whether you're male or female or your religion, but if you're gay, if you're lesbian, if you're transgender, et cetera, et cetera. So there were some decisions on some circuit courts, some federal circuit courts throughout the country. Some of them said Title VII does protect. Some of them said Title VII does not protect that. So the Supreme Court took it, and as you can imagine, that's a hot plate issue. This is something that, you know, conservative justices are going to sit there and think, holy cow, you know, we are supposed to be the arm of the conservative people here. If we're a Republican appointee like Roberts, Neil Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and what do you think the guy who nominated them, Donald Trump, is expecting those guys to do? You slam this thing supporting gay and lesbians. That's not what we do in the Trump White House. So it's ironic that the author of the opinion was actually Neil Gorsuch, which is a Donald Trump appointed.
I know.
Be his boy to run with it and do everything to defend anything that the administration wants. And Gorsuch writes a great opinion. You know, he basically says, I mean, he is a conservative, and he's joined by the liberals on the bench and Justice Roberts, Chief Justice. And he basically says, they say that Title VII prohibits discrimination if there's any portion of the decision that relates to the person's sexual orientation. So it could be their performance wasn't great. The guy, he does show up late. He does want to leave early. Yeah, he's sick a lot. And you know, he's also homosexual. So I think the guy's got to go. That, and he's also homosexual, means some consideration related to his sexual orientation, and you just can't do that under Title VII. So that's what was the main opinion of the court, which has never been interpreted that way before. It's a phenomenal opinion for every American. I mean, it's important that we know that everyone is treated fairly. And God knows, we see the Black Lives Matter. We know that there's a lot of people that have been not treated fairly over many, many decades. And let's not forget about the Browns and the Yellows and the Italians and the Polish people and the Irish and the gay and the lesbians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody has to fairly. Now, that gets into the thing you raised. Who wrote a stunning dissent? Justice Kavanaugh. How did he get on the bench? Another Donald Trump appointee. And what Kavanaugh said, interestingly, he basically says that gay and lesbian Americans cannot be treated as social outcasts or as inferior in dignity or wealth. Or self-worth. His dissent was, but the court should not rewrite the law. We are here to interpret the law. And he's saying that when this was enacted in 1964 or whenever it was, there was no intention at that time to say we are going to protect lesbians and gays and transgenders and queers, et cetera. So why is the majority rewriting it? But, and the majority is saying, hey, that's no different than saying, you look at the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, right? What does the NRA and Republicans say? Hey, right to bear arms. We have the right to have our ARs, our AK-47s, our assault weapons. It's in the Second Amendment. Well, they wrote that Second Amendment like the 1700s. They were using it's. I mean, they weren't using machine guns. They weren't using things that shoot second. So, it's okay on the one hand to say we want to interpret what the founding fathers meant when they wrote that law, but then here Kavanaugh says, well, they weren't interpreting it when they wrote Title VII. They weren't thinking about lesbian and gays. Well, you don't know that. And the bottom line is the law says you can't discriminate for prohibitive reasons. These are prohibitive. But I think what's important in this is it shows that it's giving dignity and honor to those people that are gay and lesbian, transgenders, whether by choice, by desire, by biological makeup, it's irrelevant. They're being treated equally, and you have two conservative justices on the United States Supreme Court, and they both are saying, even though Kavanaugh dissented, he is saying these people must be treated fairly. They must be treated similar. They must be treated as though there's no inferiority in their dignity or their self-worth. So that's a huge statement. And that tells that this whole community that even though Donald Trump put these people in there, and he certainly isn't our friend. I mean, believe me, he was swallowing hard at dinner last week when this opinion came down. And he said, first of all, who wrote it? And what did my dissenting Kavanaugh, who I went to bat for, what did Brett say? He said, what? He said they have the same value and same worth as me. A heterosexual? Seriously? Oh my God! I got those guys. I thought that was. I just thought that was really amazing, and I think it. I think a lot of people, myself included, said these guys are Trump thumpers. They're going to toe the line, whatever the administration wants, and I think what they just told the world is, hey, we are going to be fair, and we're going to have reasoned opinions. We're going to make our decisions based on our interpretation of the law. And if it coincides with the administration's, that's great. And if it pisses off the president because it doesn't coincide with the administration's, that's fine too. And so that restores some of my inner feelings that the justice system will do the right thing, especially in the United States Supreme Court, because God knows Mr. Trump has put federal jurists throughout this country all over the place. And he's always bragging about how I've got all these conservative judges that we put in the federal courts and the Supreme Court and yada, 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 thinking that this is going to buy favors. And guess what? It didn't work.
No, it didn't work. We got to take a break, Lou, but when we come back, I want to ask you, it's become obviously very well reported in the news that before people were allowed to attend Donald Trump's poorly attended rally in Tulsa, they were forced to sign waivers about, that if they weren't going to go after the Trump campaign, if they got COVID. I want to talk to you about waivers like that and if that really is an informed release of liability when it comes to COVID-19. I know that you guys are handling COVID cases these days. I'm talking with Lou Cairo from GWC Injury Lawyers. We're going to continue our talk right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm talking with our good friend Lou Cairo, a generous sponsor here at WCPT. He is with GWC Injury Lawyers. You can find out more about the firm at justicestartstoday.com. And I know the firm has been very involved in liability cases that have resulted because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I thought it was really interesting that Donald Trump wanted everyone who went in to the convention center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to basically sign a waiver that said, if I get sick from COVID-19, I give up my right to sue you or your campaign or anybody who is associated with this venue or with this event. And it struck me as, it reminded me, Lou, of like when you sign up for a website and it's like, make sure you read the fine print, click here, and everybody just clicks there and moves forward. I mean, is that really informed consent? Is that really something that would potentially stand up in a court of law?
Well, here, state by state, every state has different rules as far as what is determined to be a voluntary waiver of your legal rights versus a piece of paper you could throw it on the toilet. Illinois has a string of cases. Like you go to ride on a go-kart, you go to the amusement park, you go to places, you look in the back of your ticket and it says, I hereby assume all responsibility and waive any responsibility against the carnival host or whatever. Those are not valid waivers. Those things mean nothing. But you join a health club in Illinois and you sign a waiver that says, I understand and agree that I accept the responsibility for working on the equipment and that there's risks involved in working with the equipment, and you get injured, there's a string of cases, appellate court cases. You can't sue the fitness location that you're working out in because that's deemed to be informed consent as a condition of becoming a member. So there are some provisos where these things can be very, very damaging to somebody who gets innocently injured on someone else's property. I don't know the detail of what the waiver was that they have in this situation, but I can tell you that and I also don't know the law of the state in Oklahoma, what their laws require in terms of waivers, but I will say even if this was in Illinois and it was deemed to be not a valid waiver, it still is something that does become significant evidence because he made people sign it, and that means I read it. And unlike the click here that you've read the terms, which is 25 pages of fine print, and no one and their mother ever read that except for the guy who wrote it after he kept falling asleep and waking up again. So this is something. It's probably I hereby agree and understand that there's a risk of catching COVID-19. That I'll be in close proximity to other people. It's recommended that I wear a mask. It's recommended I be socially distant. It's recommended that I not look at scream in people's direction. That I blah 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 blah. And then they cram everybody in a room, and they know nobody's got a mask on, including Trump, and he's not telling people to put their mask on. Now, if somebody does and they want to sue the Trump organization or the Republican Party, that's going to be a piece of evidence. And they're going to say, well, Ms. Esposito, I understand you got COVID-19 and you're blaming my client, Mr. Trump and the Republican Party. That's your signature on this waiver, isn't it? Well, yes, it is. You read this, didn't you? Well, I didn't really have time to read it. Come on, it's 5 sentences long. You're a smart woman. You took a look at it. It says right on your signature, I have read and agree, and you signed it. It says, I understand I have the risk of catching COVID-19. You accepted that risk when you walked in, didn't you? You could have worn a mask. You chose not to. You could have worn gloves. You didn't wear them. You could have been socially distant. You were here's a picture of you. You were like hanging all over that good-looking guy. Who was that guy? It's not even your husband, for God's sake. I mean, they're going to use that kind of stuff, right? And a jury's going to think, oh, well, she certainly went in with both eyes open. She knew what the risk was. So yeah, it's going to be something. Is it a something where you file your lawsuit and the court just dismisses it immediately? Maybe yes, maybe no, depending on the law of that state. But no matter what, it will be significant evidence that will be used against somebody who becomes a victim. The real thing, though, about this whole thing that just irks me is this is a guy who's the president of the United States. He's charged with the responsibility of protecting America, and he knows COVID-19 can kill people. He knows it's highly contagious, even though he doesn't want to admit to it. All of his his experts and his panels of people around him, they tell him this, and he knows it. And then he encourages people to come to this rally for purely selfish purposes. He wants to get votes. He wants to win the election. If a couple hundred people have to die as a result of it, hey, it's all just collateral damage. I mean, those people that come there, now they've got both eyes open. They're accepting the risk for themselves. So somebody gets sick, they get the virus, and then what do? They go home after this event.
Yep.
And then they go to their spouses. They visit their parents because they have no symptoms. They're fine. They visit their elderly aunts and uncles. And before you know it, innocent people who weren't stupid enough to go to the rally, by the way. And what was there, like 150,000 people there, or was it like 6,000? I forgot the number.
The fire department said it was fewer than 6,200.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, obviously the people in Oklahoma aren't stupid. I mean, they've got an epidemic that's growing there. Their own governor, who's I'm pretty sure is a Republican, he was telling people, be socially distant. I'm recommending you don't go to this. This is not a good time to be in a very, populated, closed quarters. So everybody said not to do it, except for the guy in the mirror when Trump was brushing his teeth or trying to comb his orange hair. So it's just really a shame. I mean, I think if anybody had any respect for the guy, if there's anything left, that should have really caused you to question, why do I respect a guy who is risking people's lives? And he's so risking their lives, he's demanding that they sign a waiver. I mean, It's not like you're not going to get COVID. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's a hoax, a Democratic hoax. When the election is done, like my son Eric said, it's going to be gone. It'll be, the warm weather will come and it's going to be gone. I mean, but by the way, you
don't
sign a
sue
waiver.
me.
I don't want you to get sick and you die. I don't want your family. Holy cow.
I don't understand that either. I really don't. And I was so pleased, regardless of whatever the reason was or wasn't, I was so pleased to see that the turnout for that rally was so pathetic. And the pictures of him, I don't know if you've seen the picture of him when he got off the helicopter back at the White House grounds, and his shirt's unbuttoned, his tie's just hanging there. He's just got this look of just utter defeat and exhaustion on his face. So,
I hope he looks that way in November after the election.
He absolutely is going to look that way after November in the election. And I don't care if it's mail-in ballots, and I don't care if I have to wait 3 or 4 days to find out that he's lost in a landslide. I can be patient that way, Lou. I can be patient that way.
I don't care if he loses by one vote. I don't really care. As long as he loses.
Amen to that. Thank you, my friend. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll do this again real soon, okay?
Sounds great. Thank you.